Over 40 years ago, William Woollett Jr. was hired as the first city manager for the newly incorporated city of Irvine. Sean Joyce, who moved to Irvine with his parents and siblings in 1971, now serves as the city's present city manager. Together, they discuss Irvine's past and present and the city's unique relationship with the University of California, Irvine.
Los Angeles? No, that's an oversimplistic answer. You're right. We got to the point we just didn't want to raise our kids in that kind of a society and decided we didn't want to be in Los Angeles anymore. And we'd rather leave town and go somewhere else. It's interesting because we came to Irvine with a couple of stops in between to get away from something rather than going to something. And then we got here and found out how good it was.
You know, Bill, this is one of the areas I've always found fascinating because our parents moved there, 7 kids to Irvine in the fall of 1971. And I think back of the parents that decided to raise their families in Irvine, and they made that decision in the mid to late 60s and early 70s, and they were betting on a promise. They were betting on the general plan. They were betting on the dream. And I think the most fascinating interviews yet to be done in this city's early history is to go back and ask folks, did they realize what they had hoped for? I think they had an extraordinary vision for what the city would be, along with you and the others that you helped start this city with. But what about the parents that came here when I got here in '71 as an 8-year-old? There wasn't much here. There was almost nothing here. The vision, the farsightedness of those parents, I think that this city, you and the electeds alike, delivered on something that was difficult to envision for folks who came here in the early days.
But a big part of that vision, though, was the university, as far as I'm concerned. And the decision that was made by the company to give the initial 1,000 acres and then discount the next 500, which was made in the 60s, was a very, very significant thing because it provided the university with a presence here early on, even before we were a city. Remember, you know, we incorporated the city in December of '71. We came back later and unified the school district. Came back later and did a major redo in terms of the Irvine Ranch Water District, et cetera. And so things began to move. I've always thought it was kind of inertia, that the parents moved here for certain reasons and they began to create energy, and there was interest. People in Irvine have always been interested in what's going on.
You know, the university seems to have really legitimized the city from a very early day, right?
Yeah. No question about it. And interestingly enough, I didn't get here until we'd been a city about 2 weeks. So I wasn't at the first council meeting, but it was actually held on campus in a lecture hall. Now that was the first and the last council meeting that was held there, but my point is it definitely showed how close the university was. But our first city hall, as you know, was the faculty lounge. Yeah. Now I've never been able to find out whether we kicked them out or whether the university had a vacant building or the Irvine company had a vacant building, probably. But I think that energy, that inertia, that direction actually started before we incorporated. They didn't try to incorporate more than once. They did it the first time out. Those days. Sometimes you had to do it 2 or 3 times. But on the other hand, we also used to have fun with the faculty at UCI because they would come to our meetings, city council or whatever one of the commissions, and they would testify. The inference would be they were representing the university. This happened about 3 or 4 times. And I called Chancellor Dan and I said, I'm confused. You've got a lot of faculty and a lot of staff out here. How do I know? He said, I will tell you in advance.
Oh, really?
And he did.
It's the beginning of a great relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they bought us dinner. After incorporation, they invited the council and myself to the chancellor's house. It was in Newport Beach for dinner, and he brought most of his deans. And everybody kind of identified themselves and what they were doing and all the rest of it. And what a great way to say, welcome, you know. Bill Pierre did a plan which basically was for the university and also envisioned a city of about 10,000 people. And in the process of doing that plan, they developed a general plan for the company, which really extended to most of their properties at that time. So you had this physical thing that Bill Pereira had done. The other thing that happened was we set up a whole series of committees. We'd say we want an ag committee, we want a public safety committee, we want a committee for the environment and the rest of it. And we formed committees and we got people from the community to serve on them. And just write down their ideas. And we gave those to the man who did the general plan for us. And we said, okay, here's, you use this as a policy plan. This is what the people in our community, right out of the blocks, they don't really know much about the city or anything else. This is what they think we should do, which was a very unusual way. You know, I started 3 other new cities before I got here, so it's kind of how I knew how to do it. But I had never been in a community where they had a plan like that. And you're right, it was like a vision, yeah. And everything was vacant, or most of it. I'll have to admit, I think Sean would agree, the idea of managing a city when you have a chance to build it is really an unusual situation.
Well, it's a great advantage for our city to have started with a blank canvas and to be able to thoughtfully paint that picture for an ideal, really, I think a very well articulated ideal, and then to be able to adjust as the community adjusted, to continue to listen to the community over decades, to start with the value, the core value that you described, that we're going to listen, we're going to reach out and we're going to listen, and we're going to design on behalf of those who are here and that are coming here the ideal master plan. I think it represents itself well. I think that plan is edified every day. One of the things that we talk about here still, when we hear the validation that the empirical data shows that we're a safe community, we're not safe by accident, we're safe by design. Folks early on in this city's history designed the community so that officers had a line of sight for major thoroughfares, that there was great lighting in the parks, that the parking garages were again well lighted and accessible for easy, efficient patrol. There's nothing that has happened here, very little that's happened by accident as it relates to the evolution of the master plan.
I think a part of that also was, you'll find we have very few through streets in the residential areas. I know I live on one. You probably do too.
I live in your old tract. I mean, I live in University Park.
Okay.
And I one time in another city had had a consultant in showing and it was a city with a traditional grid system. And I'd been manager there for several years, and one of the common complaints we had was speeding on residential streets. And parents were justifiably concerned about the safety of their children out in the front yard. We had a consultant lay down a map and show the nonsensical pattern of this village, of this tract, and he spoke with a fair amount of disdain for Irvine. I live in that tract today. In this city, for all of the frustrations we might find at peak hours of traffic, the traffic is where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be there. It's on major thoroughfares at commuter peak hours. We do not have traffic problems in our residential neighborhoods. In the, over 10 years I've been here, I've never received a complaint about traffic speed on residential streets. Residential streets are very, very safe, and it's comforting to know, as a parent who raised our daughter in town, to know that wandering about in the residential neighborhoods is a very safe enjoyable time for folks. I remember where I lived. It wasn't so long ago. I grew up in the ranch with 3 brothers and 3 sisters. We moved there in September of 1971. It was a very, very different time. It was the pre-technology days, as it were, and so staying at home playing games on a black and white television or on an early days color television wasn't really an option. In any case, all the reruns were in black and white. It really didn't matter if you had a color TV. But we rode our bikes everywhere. I mean, we rode our bikes into Tustin, into Larwin Square for fun. We would ride our bikes to the south side of town. I will tell you, it's hard to believe, Bill, I don't know what your experience was, but when we were in the ranch, we were in the El Camino Real area, and I ultimately went to Venado and Irvine High School. But it was a long trek to Alpha Beta, right, in University Park. It was a bike ride down a 2-lane road, where West Park, of course, didn't exist. Woodbridge didn't exist. It was all matter of agriculture, starting with what was, I think, Moulton Drive, now Irvine Center Drive, Moulton Avenue. In any case, that was Orange Groves, what is now Irvine Center Drive and Yale. All the way down to Alfalfa, probably close to the 405 or what have you. But there was not much out here. Culverdale, which is now referred to as West Park 1, was a late 60s, early 70s project. But we rode our bikes all over town. There were my mom's still living in town, so I need to be careful that she doesn't hear of the things that her 4 boys did. But we would jump on the freight train to get into Tustin and jump off at Red Hill, be in Tustin and wander about. Do you remember the days of the long delays of the 195-car freight trains running through town? There's a reason this city has invested well over $150 million in our grade separations.
That's right. We're one of the few cities that has been able to do that, frankly. But interesting from my perspective, about the same time, because I got here a little after you did, I guess. A few months. It not only was a clean palette, and there not only was the energy, but also there was kind of a sense of wanting to be separate, wanting to be distinct. Certainly one of the reasons we incorporated was to manage our own destiny. And that extended to not only the land use, but also the revenues that would come to us and the rest of it. And the interesting thing to me was, in the 70s, people were responding to this. People were interested in what was going on. We used to take the directors out once a month and meet with the community association. So the 5 or 6 of us would sit there on tables, wherever it was, and we'd talk to them. We'd answer their questions. We'd ask them questions, et cetera. We didn't have a script. We didn't take notes. We didn't publish minutes. It was just kind of a meeting that we had. And I kind of had a rule in those days that I wanted to be the new person, HDA. Whether it was at the market, or it was at the gas station, City Hall, or wherever it was. And it's amazing what happens when you consciously reach out, because there's a tendency to kind of talk to the people who agree with you, because that's fine and it's much more fun. But if you reach out, and I think the city still is doing that, they're still reaching out.
And one of the things I think about is from early days, one of the, our high school principal, I was in the 3rd graduating class of Irvine High School, class of '81, and our high school principal was Dr. Dean Waldfogel. When I came here in 2004, it was weird, it was funny in as much as now my former high school principal was a school superintendent and a colleague. So going from looking up to the principal to looking up to the superintendent, but working with him collegially was really surreal for me. But the connections between the school district and the city have always been very, very dynamic, and the aspirations for both the city council and the board of of education has always been so aspirational that in the end, I think there's been just a whole lot of success between the two parties. But for me, getting here, and I had been a city manager for 11 years, but I will tell you it was odd coming in and meeting with the school superintendent as my former high school principal. Fortunately, I wasn't in the principal's office very often.
I was going to say, how
we
did you
didn't
know
have,
him
we,
so
yeah, there
well?
wasn't a great deal of familiarity, thank goodness. You know, when I first moved here, though, when we went to, several of us went to St. Cecilia in Tustin.
Okay.
And so for me, so 71 through 75 or 74 or so, we'd introduce ourselves on the first day of class or, you know, at other times during the year. And I would say I lived in Irvine. People in Tustin didn't know where Irvine was. They hadn't even heard of it. Where's that? A new city. They hadn't even heard of it. Today, I think they know who we are.
Yeah, they do, and we really are different. You know, you travel around, and I'm always glad to get home. And of course, I lived in town for 40-some years, I guess now, and that difference projects itself. I think it affects people's habit patterns. It's not only a question of safety, but the question of participation, of expectations. People's expectations are far greater than our ability to meet them, you know.
In my role as city manager today, when I introduce myself and greet new employees every month, I remind them of our duty to make good on the implicit promise we make to those who choose to live here, whether they rent or buy, or people who visit or bring their businesses and keep their businesses here. We make an implicit promise to those who are looking about and determine that Irvine's the right place for them when they see an image, when they drive through our streets, when they see our parks, when they learn of the support that we provide to our Board of Education, to our school district, when they see our investment in public safety, when they see the open space, they think they're getting something here. And we pay a premium to live in Irvine. It's more expensive to live here than other places. We need to make good on that promise. We need to make sure that 20 years from now, certainly today and 20 years from now and beyond, that we're still providing what people believe they're getting when they come to Irvine. It doesn't cost a nickel more to provide great customer service than it does poor. So let's always strive for great customer service. And that's a value that you established, Bill. Others that followed edified as well. And I have the obligation of carrying that forward on behalf of 12 to 1,400 employees every day.
Are you able to translate that into a budget?
Well, I could tell you, I have worked for city councils in Irvine, council members here, that have never denied a reasonable request for funding services. I think that I need to always be mindful of their great aspirations and reflect what it is city council members want for their community in the budget that I prepare and present to them. And I've had extraordinary support, frankly nothing but support in the funding plans that I've presented to the city council. They're unafraid to fund new ideas. They're not afraid to make the occasional mistake. I think the greatest fear that they have, and therefore that I have, is that of complacency. We need to make sure that we don't ever just believe the press, that we make sure that we're striving to achieve great things.
I think there are 3 or 4 things that have been our goals as far as I'm concerned. One is keep it accessible, keep it simple, communicate it often, be willing to take risks. I think one of the things that city managers do the best is to take the risk of the council saying no. Because many times that's where the leadership comes from. Councils change, they come and go, etc., or even their attitudes change. But the single thing that happens, and I'm biased obviously, is you have this position of the city manager. Have you ever wondered why cities only have one city manager?
I haven't wondered. I've never wanted to, Bill. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what you think.
No, and of course, people who say, what does the city manager do? Why do we have one?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, okay, remember you only have one mayor at the same time. So it's one of each. And the leadership obviously comes from those positions. And I think that's particularly true in a community like this where you need to have an idea, and that's what you're getting at, as to where you want to go. Some years ago, we sat down, and the senior staff and myself, we put together a code of ethics for the city that said, here's our core beliefs and the way we function. And the city is pretty well still living up to that. They're still functioning in that fashion. But I think, people, I think, want different things from the local government. A lot of them feel we're just kind of an interruption. And those of us who are in it have to remember that just because we don't hear from them doesn't mean they're satisfied, or doesn't mean that they're critical. What it may mean is they're okay. And I think that's very much where we are here. I think the community is okay.
This is I tend to think of it actually very similarly. I think folks, if we're delivering on that implicit promise that I referred to earlier, then folks are coming home at the end of a long day and enjoying their quality of life, enjoying their family life, enjoying what brings them peace. And we've got wide open space. We've got great access to trails for folks to spend time with the folks close to them at the end of the day, and to relax. And I think that if we're delivering, people can spend their time how they really wish to. I'm always reminded this is a community where 2/3 of adults 25 years of age or older have bachelor's degrees. Folks are well educated. They know how to be engaged. I think one of the great challenges that we need to meet today is to both respect the villages and the village concept, but also make sure that folks feel connected to one community. It's one of the great challenges as over our time, and certainly all of your time in Irvine, Bill. We started where Culverdale and the ranch were the closest neighborhoods to one another. Now we're all living in a closer environment. And as we define ourselves by Woodbridge or University Park or Northwood or anywhere else, I need to make sure that this organization is connected with the entire community, and that when we have community celebrations, we bring people together. I think I applaud those who made the decision before I ever got here to have a global village. I mean, we don't have a strawberry festival. We don't have a garlic festival. We have a global village annual event. Our signature event is about bringing people together to share the art, the music, the food, the culture, the religions that are throughout this community, that we bring folks together to celebrate both the differences among us and, of course, the similarities among us. I think it's a great thing. I just love being a part of that event every year and coming here and seeing a community come together. And the best part of Global Village is the biggest problem we have is accommodating the large crowd that we attract.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good problem to have?
Oh yeah, it is a nice problem to have.
I'm humbled every day. I think that carrying the mantle of those before me and representing the City Council's aspirations, city managers are all the while making sure that we're checking in and hearing what the elected folks want for the community. I'm proud to have maintained the high standard that again has been set before me. I get to work with terrific people every day. One of the most rewarding things I do every day is working with, again, 1,200 to 1,400 employees that care about delivering great services to the community. I'm proud of the role that I've played on behalf of the City Council and the community to advance the many aspirations that this community has and wishes for us. And I try not to, I guess I'm reluctant to attach myself singularly to anything, because nothing I do alone. I think that the mantra of the city manager forever has been our role is that of orchestra leader, and we may not play any one instrument particularly well, but if we're doing our jobs well, we're successful through the efforts of others, and I'm proud of everything this organization continues to do.
Well, it's interesting. I agree with what you're saying, and I think we learned early on, you pick good people, then you give them room to do their job and support them only if they need it. And I think this organization still does that. When I think through the years of the decisions we made, that we involved the directors, all of them. When you're sitting there at a table and you say to the police chief, what do you think about having this recreation program? Or you to somebody else, totally out of their area of interest or knowledge, and they get to the point where they like that, because they're getting involved in kinds of decisions which normally they wouldn't be. Encourages them, and they kind of flourish, I think, under those circumstances. Plus, I guess you call it the collegial model or whatever it is, but one of the things which we've done, I think, well, is to provide communications between the city council and the staff, absolutely. And I think that's essential. For you to know, what the council wants it up to, and the same thing in reverse. And I think you do a good job of that. Because I seldom see you standing up and sharing in council meetings. I don't see you standing there asking for the spotlight. Please. Doesn't happen. The best council meetings I go to are ones where I don't have to say anything.
Right. Right. It's, I was told by a wise man many, many years ago, but it's called a city council meeting. It's not referred to as a staff meeting.
Absolutely.
We've got our time away from the council meetings to play roles of facilitators and leaders and collaborators. Those are city council meetings, and we are there to serve the city council, to hear what they wish for this city, and to provide good, honest work. I believe, as it relates to a city council meeting, it's staff's role to facilitate informed public policy decision making. We will have done our jobs well by providing all of the information that a city council needs to make an informed decision. Once they make that decision, what's our job? It's to make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even if you disagree with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not that we've ever disagreed with the decision they've ever made. Come on, Bill. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I never did.
Oh, no. I have to scratch my head.
I was only here 17 years.
But they tell us what they want. We make it happen. That's the deal.
In that sense, I think the city had a real advantage of not being first. The university got here before we did. And they suffered through some growing pains, as any organization would in the early years. They had funding problems in terms, they didn't have student housing that they needed, and some of these other things that were simply not available. And yet they struggled through. And as a result of that, we have a lot of housing off campus that the students live in. The UCI, as far as I know, still doesn't have all the housing they'd like to have. But it wouldn't have occurred if they'd had it from the beginning. But it wasn't provided, so they were able to provide it. We talked for years with each other about a medical school, a hospital. We were the biggest city in the state of California that didn't have a hospital. UCI headed up a group. We had some people on it, a committee to bring a hospital to Irvine. And we worked on that thing for 12 years. But the fact of the matter is, we were complementing each other. The agreement we negotiated with UCI early on relates to fire services. We set up our own police department. The arrangement that we made with them in terms of the campus police, et cetera. The Barclay Theater is another perfectly good example of it. And you say, we had a lot of areas of common interest. We had some areas, frankly, we disagreed with. And one of those was whether you had to pay for parking when you went to the athletic events. Chancellor Dan and I argued about this, and obviously it was his property, but it just took a long time to finally get to the point where that parking could be accessible. But I guess the thing that was interesting about that was we talked to each other. And if we disagreed, we didn't go talk to the newspaper. We'd pick up the phone. And we had the same kind of relationship with the Irvine company, which really helped. So I think you're right, we have grown together. And the university's presence here during our growth period was particularly important because they showed how it could be done. They were attracting bright young people. They were reaching out to hire good faculty and staff, et cetera. They were setting up programs, and they gave me a chance to be a lecturer in graduate school of management and to talk to young students about what the world was really like instead of what they were learning from, a specific. We had the opportunity to do stuff like that. I'd love to hear your answer to that question.
Well, I would tell you, I think you with your counterparts built a strong foundation because I will tell you every minute of my relationship with UCI has been positive. I came into a great situation. I think that the city managers before me had done a great job and the chancellors before had done a great job working together because we've had the most collegial relationship one could imagine. And I've heard from counterparts throughout the state of tensions that exist from time to time with the universities. This has been nothing but positive. We have a great relationship with the chancellor's office and others throughout the faculty. I've sat on the board of the Barclay Theater, worked with the chancellor's office, of course, throughout my decade here. And we've talked about transportation, we've talked about parking, and we've talked about them only from a creative, solution-oriented perspective. Yeah. It's been all positive. It's been terrific.
Well, I think the reverse is true. If you talk to people from the university, they will say, my perspective has changed because I've had an opportunity to look at something from a different viewpoint. One of the issues that was really critical to us was the toll road. When they put together the general plan for the university, we realized they had to have another connection other than the first one that they had. And that was going to be on the other side. And we realized as we got out through it that we were going to have to buy property from the university. Well, the university does not easily give up property, even without regard to what it costs. Fortunately, Jack Peltison was the chancellor at the time, and then of course he became promoted and was the president when we finally got the deal made. But it took us several years to reach an understanding about a 13-acre piece of property, and we didn't necessarily disagree with where we were going to go with it. The question was, how did we get there? But it was just like building jamboree through the base. Same thing with the Marine Corps and the Irvine Company.
Well, and the university has reached out to us when they didn't need to consult on the faculty housing, on housing throughout the campus. As we know, the university can make those decisions by itself, working with the state architect. UCI has always made us aware of their plans, their advanced plans, coordinated with us on issues of equal importance, traffic circulation around the university, impacts of their growth, where they could have just steadfastly maintained we don't need to involve you. As a city, they've not done that. They've been very welcoming of ideas. There's been great, again, collegiality throughout, and the community's better for it. I think it's rather unique. It's such a positive relationship. I couldn't think of a blemish in the decade that I've been here. Yeah. I cannot think of a single blemish. There's an open communication. There's a trust. It's a really easy relationship. Well, we serve the same folks. If someone's at UCI, they're either a resident of Irvine or they're a visitor to the city. We understand the students' needs. We understand the university's needs quite well. Commonality involves transportation, safety, Bill, you know that our police department stands at the ready to assist the campus police whenever necessary, and we can bolster their force quite significantly as circumstances warrant, and occasionally they do. We serve the same folks. We serve them in many common areas, different areas, but what we do have in common is if somebody's on that campus, they're our customer. So we serve them in every way possible. We're concerned with traffic circulation for folks who visit the campus. The retail around the university is important to us for the economy and for the businesses around there. The parking at the retail centers adjacent to the university is something with which we concern ourselves to ensure that business owners and operators are well served by the city's support. We bring problems to one another's attention and solve them together with the university. But we serve lots of common interests, I believe. The Barclay Theater, I'm remiss to not mention that we've got a, if not unique, one of very few relationships where we share operation of the Barclay Theater, and that's served our community and the university very, very well for 25 years or so, 30 years, almost 30 years.
Well, when we did the Barclay, we consciously sized it, looking at the other theaters in the county. And they fitted a niche of whatever it was, 750 seats.
That's
or
right.
whatever it was.
That's right.
And that was something that, yeah, obviously, we were able to negotiate with them, you know. Although I'll have to ask you, what is the current estimated population of the city at build-out?
Just over 300,000, 308, 309,000 is the estimate. We revisit that number every year so that, like everything else, we don't become complacent in planning for a population that's not based on our projections of reality. So we're looking at about 310,000 people or so. Today, as we speak, we're at about 250,000 or so.
Yeah, as I remember when we started out, the company's plan was 450. By the time we got through our general plan, it was half that. Now, we didn't say you could have 225,000. Right. Obviously, you can't very well do that. You can't say to somebody you can move in or you can't move in, but we can talk about number of dwelling units, et cetera. And so even with over 300, the plan still works.
I believe so, and we check it all the time. I think the permanent open space that was approved by our voters in 1988 ensured a reduction in the then projected population build-out versus what we see today.
I don't know the specific figures, but I know that the various gatherings that I go to in my lifetime, you can see the ethnic diversity, which we have encouraged, I think, by what we've done. And we have organizations that represent a particular race or a particular interest or whatever it is. And I think we have encouraged that. I think the village concept has encouraged that. You have certain parts of the city, and I know we just moved again, and we're still in Woodbridge, so we're getting used to a new neighborhood, et cetera. And we have, next to us, we have a triple family, a grandmother, a mother with 2 children, and then the grandchild. And this is a regular single family residence. Up the block, we have somebody that has no children. We obviously have no children, et cetera. And it accommodates all of that.
You know, having grown up here and then having the great pleasure of serving folks here, the demographics have changed dramatically from when I was in grade school and high school. And having grown up here and then moved away when I went to college and got married, albeit all within the same county, I always wanted to come back to and my parents didn't leave here, and other families have always lived here, so I've always been visiting Irvine even when I wasn't living here. One of the great attractions of Irvine was its diversity. For me to be able to raise my child in a diverse community was something of great appeal to my wife and I. And in fact, I mean, it's played out. I mean, she has met people whose whose parents are from all over the world, and my daughter is enriched for it. And there are little nuances I see, or when she has a friend over the house, I'm reminded of something that I don't have to lecture about. She just gets to live and experience and come to the realization that Irvine is a richer place for its diversity. One of the great sources of pride for me as a parent is our ability, and we have just the one child, is our ability to travel every summer and take a pretty grand vacation somewhere else in the world, and to be able to introduce diversity where my daughter, without a lecture, can learn that our way isn't always the best way or the right way, and one needs not assign any value to how we do what we do, but rather absorb all of the many messages that she receives by seeing the world and seeing that everybody's different and everybody's the same. And I think we live in a community where we get to live that every day. The challenge that I have in my role is to make sure that we're coming together, that we're just coming together, that there's an openness and a willingness to come together so that we don't inadvertently create a fractionalized community, but rather a cohesive one. And that's why, again, the Global Village, I think that our anchor markets are very, very inviting. Folks, the restaurants and the increasing diversity of restaurants is something that I've aspired for and talked with the Irvine Company about over the years. It's really important that if we learn about a culture and we're introduced to a culture new to us, maybe first by food, that'll really help us come together, because what can be more communal than that?
And yet, coming together does not necessarily require agreement.
Oh.
So you really have the opportunity to communicate, whatever it is.
The wisdom of a married man, Bill. The wisdom of a married man.
That's right.
I think the university has played an important role as its success has attracted more success. That you've got more successful programs at the university, attracts students from all over the country. I mean, all over the world. As a resident of University Park, it should be no surprise that I live near the university, and I see the diverse population that attends UCI. I think UCI, I think Bill said it very well earlier, really served as the primary key anchor for this community. And it has continued to play that role by attracting very bright students from everywhere to the university, therefore to Irvine. And folks who come to Irvine, I'm proud to say, and Bill, I know on your own behalf, proud to say that when folks come to Irvine, they want to be here and they want to stay here for a good long time. And so I think the university continues to serve as an anchor for a diverse community.
One of my keys to UCI is water polo. As Sean knows, my son played water polo at University High School and then at UCI. And I now have a grandson who's played water polo at UCI. So by the time you go sit next to a swimming pool, and with the sun in your face, etc., and you look at not only your kids, but the other ones, you begin to see that the diversity really is there, Yeah,
and whether it's on campus or in our high school or elementary school campuses, folks are coming together. And again, I think it's not enough to be diverse. It's critically important that there is integration and that there is acceptance, blind acceptance of folks who may have a different point of view. As you said, it's most important that they respect one another. And I think this is a community that creates a safe environment for folks to learn about one another and learn to appreciate one another. And that's always a challenge that we need to facilitate. We need to meet to create a safe environment for folks to get along.
Well, and it's relating to each other, of course, leads to other subjects that you haven't even thought about, because there's a kind of a synergistic kind of a thing that occurs when you sit and talk to somebody that you don't know, this business of meeting new people unconsciously. I go down to Hoag Hospital a couple of days a week for an hour, and I get a chance to meet other people, etc. And one of the things which I do, I've got this pusher, and others have them. And when I see somebody else who has one, I ask them if they want to race. I asked a woman this a couple of weeks ago that who I didn't know. I said to her, how about a race? And she looked me right straight in the eye and she said, you'd lose. And I did. No, I've never raced one of them. I'd probably be a problem if I did. No, I think the diversity is one of the strengths. We have a woman here who put her 4 children on the last helicopter that left. There was not room for her. There was not room for her husband. But she placed her 4 kids on the helicopter. And so they could be evacuated. She would have to find some other way to get out of that country. Today, one is a lawyer, one is an engineer, another is a minister, etc. And so you just realize that that was a really significant experience for them. And the fact of the matter is that that whole effort was a very diverse effort. And she, of course, has been active in the city.
You know, one of the great responsibilities that we have as city managers is to ensure that our workforce reflects the community.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we all take very seriously. I'm so proud of our chief of police who has made that a very important goal of his throughout his 11 or 12 years as chief of police here, but that's important as well. It can happen, if we're doing it well, it can happen quite by happenstance. You just have an open mind and a fair mind and manifest that through your hiring practices, but it's also important that we go the extra mile to reach out to folks to make sure that we are the community. We're part of the community, we're reflective of the community, and I'm proud of what we've done here and continue to do. You know, my fondest memory is really from this very room. Having grown up in Irvine and being the 6th of 7 children, the youngest of 4 boys, and I'll say diplomatically a late bloomer academically, to find myself city manager of my hometown was a source of great pride and remains so today.
I think mine had to do with UCI and the students in the city. Early on, Campus Drive was not improved to the full width. We just had half of it. And that was basically on the university side. So you had this big swath of dirt, probably 80 foot, 100 foot wide, et cetera. Our first city hall, of course, was in the faculty lounge on the 2nd floor of that building. And you had students who couldn't find a place to live, who had been putting tents up on campus, just as a place for them to stay. Somebody complained about the fact that we had tents in this area right next to City Hall. So the matter, of course, was brought up to the city council, et cetera. And we had people from the university and the students in the city, and all of us were there, and we were talking about this thing, trying to figure out an answer to this problem. And the result of it was the university finally said, we'll find another place for the kids. And that's where I can picture tents. And, you know, this is the kind of thing, we could have had marches and we could have had newspaper coverage and everything else. The fact of the matter is we just kind of sat down, we worked it out. The kids would still had a place to pitch their tents. And obviously, eventually we finally got the street widened. But that's one of my fondest memories because it involved, it's another one of those areas where the university was willing to say, okay, we got to do something different.
And I'd like to congratulate UCI on 50 years of success and look forward to the next many, many years of terrific success and growth at UCI.
I would certainly echo those comments, only to say that probably, I think Sean will probably be watching me longer than I will. And what are you, with 36 years difference in age?
I'm 52, thanks, Bill.
Really? Congratulations.
Yeah,
How
working
you
on it,
do?
guy, working on it.
No, I think I have very positive memories. Obviously, I still live here, and I worked here for a long time too. And it's kind of look at this as my hometown. And the university, of course, is very much a part of that. But I'm afraid I won't stick around to reach the end. The end, to me, looks very positive. The thing we need to learn to do is not to put ourselves first. To be willing to put somebody else first. To be willing to really listen to them, really care about what they're saying, etc. Because you don't earn any money with your mouth open.
Thanks, Bill. I love talking with you. I love listening to you.
I love listening. Could I have an appointment with you?
Anytime. You have an open door to the city manager's office.
I want to talk to you about,
Thanks, folks.